Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our second November lunchtime lecture. I'm delighted to welcome Peter Meredith. Peter needs no introduction. He was our honorary librarian for many years and did much good work re-indexing and boxing the archive collection, I remember, when I used to pop in and see you on a lunchtime at Claremont.
Yeah.
Peter's going to talk to us this lunchtime about Ralph Thoresby's diary. Roots and Roots diaries can take many forms, probably as many as the people who write them. So, and Peter, he's contributed a great article in this year's publication, and I think this is based on that. So, over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And good afternoon. Yes, I am going to talk about the diary, and particularly that part of it which I spent a lot of time looking at for the article in the latest journal. This really starts, I suppose, with a feeling a couple of years ago that we really ought to be commemorating in some way Ralph Thoresby's death. The idea grew. The feeling, I think generally, certainly mine, was that we should, as far as possible, draw upon the local material rather than going off and trying to find things elsewhere in the country or even in the world. And so we really looked at what was local, and what was local, of course, was the Leeds Central Library, the Brotherton, which houses the Yorkshire Historical and Archaeological Society material, which is, of course, really the place to go for Ralph Thoresby's diary. But there's also material in the West Yorkshire Archives, in the Leeds part, and in the Wakefield, what used to be the Registry of Deeds, dotted about all over the place. And we felt, as far as possible, we ought to use the material which was local to us in order to demonstrate, A, that there was still local interest, and B, that we held quite a lot of important material. One of the pieces of material which I've been intrigued by for many years is the material which is in the grammar school at Leeds. The grammar school at Leeds doesn't have a huge collection of Ralph Thoresby material, but it does have something which is very, very intriguing. It was published partly, not wholly, partly, in the Thoresby Society Journal in 1928. And what it is, as far as Ralph Thoresby is concerned, is a tiny piece of his diary. That, for me, is what is really centrally interesting. However, this is set in a manuscript which was put together by Thomas Wilson. Now, Thomas Wilson, one of those people who features, I think, very largely in the latest Thoresby Society Journal, is becoming more and more a key, I think, to attitudes to Ralph Thoresby, attitudes to the history of the area in the 17th, in the early 18th century. He is a key figure, and he's a key figure in particular in this instance because he was one of those that went along to Anna Thoresby after Ralph Thoresby's death in 1725 and looked through the mass of material which survived from the library and from the museum that Ralph had accumulated during his lifetime. It's not just that he went there and searched through this material, which to all accounts was rotting, It was open to the snow, it is said, and the rain, and the material was deteriorating badly. Not only did he go and look at this, but he actually took material from it, which he then purchased from Anna Thoresby, and did a variety of things with it. Well, one of the things that he did was to put a lot of the manuscript material together into a single volume. It's very miscellaneous, but it was a single volume. It's about, well, it's over 200 leaves, so it's quite a big volume. And he saved it. That's all one can say. He saved it. Had it not been that he had gone there, that he purchased this stuff, because that's what it must have seemed like to most people, he saved it for us. And one of the things that he saved, and I think for me this is one of the most important, is this tiny fragment of the diary. This is the, well, most of it, I should say, is what was published in the 1928 Thoresby Journal. But clearly, G.D. Lum, who was the initiator of the transcription and the publication of this, had great difficulty in reading it. And he says the handwriting is so small that it is very trying to the eyes. And he got Emily Hargrave, somewhat younger person, to come and help with the transcription of this section. They didn't, neither of them managed to do the whole thing. It's not a complete transcription of the whole of that diary. There are only, I should say, 4 leaves that contain the diary material. So it isn't a lot. It's a small amount, but it is incredibly difficult to read. But I thought, right, now's the opportunity to go back to this material, fill in the gaps, or make any corrections that Lum and Hargrave made, and any mistakes that they made, correct them, and then we can publish it in this latest volume, which we're going to put out in honour of Ralph Thoresby. I ran up against exactly the same problems that G.D. Lum had. One shouldn't assume automatically that one is going to be able to read things that other people can't read. It is absolutely fiendish. And this made me think more about it as an artifact rather than as a text. And I began to think there's something more to be done here. This is not just a piece of the diary which happened not to be around when Hunter did his edition. He didn't know of this, and that was why it was important and why the Lum and Hargrave published it, because it was an addition to the Hunter edition of the diary. So it was important in that way, but there was something more to it than that. It wasn't just a piece of the diary which hadn't been noticed before. So as I say, I went back to it. I had a close look at it, but then I thought artifact rather than text. Let's think about the situation in which this was written, how it was written, what you require in order to write something like this, and back to basics. In other words, get right back to basics. Now, the first thing that I thought you needed to look at is the paper. Obviously, you can't write a diary if you haven't got any paper. In fact, the thing that Ralph Thoresby's father said to him, and I must say he was 19 at the time, so he hadn't been writing, as far as we know, a diary before he was 19. But his father wrote him in the letter, which must be by now be very well known, "I would have you in a little book which you may either buy or make of 2 or 3 sheets of paper. Take a little journal of anything remarkable every day, principally as to yourself. Now, that's what I'm interested in there, 2 or 3 sheets of paper. Now, what does that mean, 2 or 3 sheets of paper? I mean, we're so used to A4, we're used to the normal sizes of paper, but what for Ralph would 2 or 3 sheets of paper be? Well, broadly speaking, how you would buy paper at the time would be in double folio sheets. Now, a double folio sheet is roughly the size of A3. If you think of an A3 sheet, that's roughly speaking a double folio. You then fold it. For those of you who are here, I can actually demonstrate this, but you fold it in two, and that provides you with a folio. So there's your big one. You fold it over in two, and that provides you with your folio. And that is the form in which the manuscript diary appears in the grammar school manuscript. So it's written like that. If you wanted it to be smaller, of course, you fold it again, and then you have a quarto size. And if you want it even smaller, you fold it again, and you have an octavo. But we're not concerned with the smaller ones. We're concerned with that folio. So again, thinking artifact is thinking of an artifact. What do you do if you have a folio sheet and you are traveling on a coach, standing in a church, thinking of copying something down? What do you do with it? Well, you obviously fold it. You fold it that way and create a sort of high, long sheet, or you fold it that way and you create a tiny little booklet, which is then stiff enough to write on. If you want to do, if you're looking at a church wall and you want to copy something down, with that paper in your hand, folded several times, you've got enough stiffness to be able to write on it. So paper first. Secondly, obviously, in order to write, you need ink and you need a pen. And my first slide, if I can get it, of course. Oh, sorry, that one. My first slide demonstrates the pen. What I'd like you to look at, if you can see it, is at the top point where I've sharpened the quill a little bit. It's obviously a large feather from a bird, and it's a quill. And if you look at the top, you can see there's kind of fuzziness inside the actual tube of the quill. That's the first thing you have to get rid of. When you've cut your quill, so you need a pen knife, obviously, to do it, a pen knife, you cut the end of the quill, you shape it, and then you clear out that material which is inside. Otherwise, you'd be in a mess when you dipped it into the ink. The other thing, that when I was younger, I always imagined fancifully that people wrote with the full quill, and there was this wonderful plume coming out as they wrote in a beautiful hand in a beautiful book. But in fact, that would be an awful nuisance, especially if you were a traveller, and therefore almost certainly you'd have to cut down your quill so that you were working with something more like that. That is like that actually because the moth got at it and it ate a lot of the quill, and so I then cut it down anyway. So it was, but that's roughly speaking what it might look like. So we've got ink you buy or you make. You can make it if you want to, but you buy it. So you've got your ink, you've got your quill pen, you've got your paper, but you're not at home. You're not there with your, oh, we'll get this right eventually. You're not there with your lovely inkwell that you can dip your pen into and write. So what do? Well, you have a travelling inkwell, and that is a travelling inkwell. It's not, I confess, it's not 18th century, it's an early 19th century one, but it's a similar kind of device. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a kind of clip, and that lid there folds down and clips over the inkwell, and then the other cover covers over the top. So you've got an absolutely ink-tight container for your ink. I was delighted to see that Danny last week showed a similar ink container, though a rather more elaborate one that had been given to the Earl of Harewood, I think. So you are able, if you are traveling around, to bring out your traveling ink well, dip it in and dip your pen in and write. So we've got ink, we've got pen, we've got paper, and we're all set to move. Now, the other thing that struck me about the manuscript. Oh, we ought to look at this one first, I suppose, just to demonstrate the thing in action. There's somebody with a lovely inkwell on the left of the screen there, and a beautiful cut quill writing in his book. On the other side, there's somebody actually sharpening a quill. And there you can see the pen. That's exactly what you need. You need a pen, you need your quill, and you sharpen it in exactly the way that you do. That is how anybody sharpening a quill now would do it. Those happen to be the doctors of the church, but never mind. They're doing the same menial job that you have to do when you're getting ready to write. Now, this is what we're dealing with. This is what it looks like. And if you think in terms of the size that I was mentioning, i.e. about this size, about the size of the folio, you'll see that that writing is very, very small indeed. But more importantly, notice the fold down the middle of the page, and then notice a fainter fold across the page. That is clear evidence that what we're looking at is a piece of paper which has been folded in two ways in order to stiffen it. And why do you stiffen it? Because you're not at home. You're not able to spread it neatly on a table. You're carrying it somewhere with you. Now, if he's carrying it with him, Ralph Thoresby, where is he? He's not sitting at home with his writing up his diary beautifully on the table. He is traveling. And what we have got here, and this is where I think it becomes very important, what we've got here is the original form of the diary. What Hunter produced in his published version is the fair copy diary, after Ralph Thoresby had taken his first notes. He then copied it up in the fair copy into these lovely little volumes. What this is, and as far as I know, it is the only surviving piece. This is the original notes that Ralph was taking when he was going around the country, when he was on the coach, when he was in a church. Wherever he was making his notes. What is very, very difficult, and what I would like to be able to work out, is when he actually wrote it. because though you can see that folding it up is very useful, you're able then to have it work on it wherever you happen to be. Is this the form that you would need for writing up a sermon? Because much of this material in the surviving pages is sermon material. So is he sitting in the church with his folded sheet in front of him, writing as he hears the sermon, or is he taking it home with him, back to the inn or wherever he happens to be, and writing it up afterwards? It's very difficult to say. In the diary itself, he says, wrote the heads of the sermons, and that's the day after he'd heard the sermon. So is this material which he's writing up afterwards, or is it material that he's actually writing down on at the moment of delivery? The other thing which I'm not sure how clearly you can see is the pattern of the ink. So that the first one, the first top corner looks as though it's been written fairly continuously. But when you move down into the lower part, you can see where he's dipped his pen, and then it's gone slightly thicker, and then it's got thinner and thinner, and then he's dipped his pen again, so that you can see the actual pattern of Thoresby writing the notes. If you look at the other side, and that is the other side, because it's upside down, that was written before he went down to London. So that is written without the pressures of listening to a sermon or standing in a church writing. That is something which he's written on his desk, on his table at home. And they are the letters that he took down with him to London. Because what I should have said perhaps at the beginning, that what he's doing is trying to sort out his brother and his brother-in-law's problems, financial problems, and their problems are rooted in London. He has to get to London to meet the creditors, to try and sort out the problems that his brother and brother-in-law are in. And these letters are letters written by people in Leeds saying, these are good people, these are people you ought to treat kindly. And he's obviously written them down in advance before he went down to London. And therefore they should be fairly smoothly written, because they won't have the problem of being at the time on a journey somewhere. But you'll notice the upside down, the first one I showed you has the part on the left-hand side is right way up, part on the other side, the right-hand side, is upside down, and that is it turned around. This is just a larger version of it. It's severely abbreviated, which is one of the problems with trying to read it. And I won't dwell on it, but you can see there, I think, the differing patterns of the ink, the actual writing of the diary. He's kept on dipping his pen. You can see it's constantly being dipped in the ink. This is to show what it looks like when he produces when he's reproducing a sermon. You can see at the top corner there is a 6, and that is one of the heads of the sermon. So 6, and then it's something about a coma that follows from it. And that part either was written while he was listening to the sermon, or else it was one of those things that was written up afterwards. I think it's written while the sermon is happening. He never seems to have mastered shorthand. Shorthand was one of the things which was very commonly used to write up sermons, take them home, and then discuss them with like-minded friends. But as far as I can tell, Ralph Thoresby didn't use shorthand at all. And so when he was copying things down, when he was noting during the sermon, he was actually doing it on the spot. And you can see that he'd had a fair number of problems with the ink too. There's some blodges and splodges just where he has filled the quill and then started writing again. But halfway down, you move into non-sermon material. And that non-sermon material is marginally better. I wouldn't say it's a huge improvement on the other, but marginally better than the part above. It's all like this, I'm afraid. It doesn't get any more beautiful. You know, it continues to be looking like this. These are the letters, and what I really wanted to draw your attention to is the way in which the letters are spaced. So the letters on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and then when you get down to that bottom corner, that is the diary upside down. And suddenly the whole thing gets compressed, and you're dealing with much smaller handwriting. So that the upper part and the right-hand side, more or less, are the normal, as he would write if you were writing in a letter to somebody. But that bit down at the bottom there is the corner that happened to be blank, so he turned it upside down and finished off his diary in that corner. That is really just to show you what you're faced with when you see one big page. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. One of the things which came out of the reinvestigation of what Lum and Hargrave had published in the journal early in the 1928, early in the 20th century, was that though they published the first bit of the diary, immediately after it, there's another bit of the diary which they, for some reason, didn't bother to publish. And the interesting thing about that is that it's a part of the diary which is replicated in one of the fair copies. So you can see the kind of thing that Ralph Thoresby is doing when he fair copies his notes up. And that there is the preparation for his going on the journey. The first bit is a list of books, Royal Society publications, which he is not quite sure why he's made a list of them. Is it that when he gets to the Townley household, which is where he's heading in Lancashire, is he going to look up these books? And therefore he's making a list of the ones he hasn't got at home. Seems like that because there's a little cross against one of them, which says, got later in London. Doesn't say it quite like that, but that's the implication. He got it later in London. So it sounds as though he hasn't got these copies. And then in the lower part there, he is making a list of all the places he's going to visit. So it's not strictly speaking the diary, it's the preparation for the diary, where he's going, or where he hopes to go. And the last one is Downham diamonds. He's hoping to find some Downham diamonds. When he gets there, as you can see from the diary later on, it's dark. So he doesn't see any diamonds and he doesn't get any diamonds. So that's a failed one. And in some of the other cases, he's hoping to meet somebody and clearly fails, doesn't manage it. But that's the kind of preparation for the diary, preparation for the visit that he's making. And there again, you can see it's much more formally written, much easier, well, very easy, in fact, to read. Right, now I said that was Roots, by the way, with a double OT, because it seemed to me that so often we don't bother about trying to find out how these things are written. We just hope we can understand what they're saying. And that's why I thought we ought to look at Roots. But there are other routes as well. And I think I'm very, very much on friendly terms with Ralph Thoresby here. He clearly loves noting down every place that he passes on his way from somewhere, from one place to another. And it struck me that he might have had access to things like this. Now, this is the famous Ogilvy's Britannia, which came out at the end of the 17th century, but it came out as a prestige volume. I mean, it was a huge folio volume, enormously expensive. Nobody would be able to purchase it really unless they were very well off. But of course, at the time, books are not published as they are today, all in one block. They're published as separate sheets, and you bought your sheets and you had them bound up as you wanted. So you could actually buy separate sheets from the Britannia, which you could then use. But did people use them? There's a wonderful description at the beginning of Britannia of how this is put together, and it says, the route starts at the bottom on the left, and you follow it up to the top, and then you go down to the bottom, and then so on all the way across. And it explains that if the road is hedged, then it will have lines on either side of it. If it's not hedged on one side but hedged on the other, it'll have a solid line on one side and a dotted line on the other side. It doesn't say anything about the little towns, how they're indicated or what the little churches signify. But it does tell you about the hills. And if you look on the 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth one across, you'll see that the hill appears to be shooting downwards. What that means, of course, is that you go up on this side, but you come down on that side. So I don't know how it works in that case, because you don't seem to go up, you seem to just come down. But that iconographically is what it says, iconographically depicted. And this one down here on this side is the same. They're drawn as two, usually you get two hills, one going one way and one going the other way. But that's a puzzle. You also get the compass points, because of course, as anybody knows who drives any distance, you're constantly changing direction. So these are put in to show that the route changes direction. And I think the one which changes direction most is the one on the far side, which is on the way into York. It's just an indication of the care with which the Ogilvy Britannia was created. I don't know, because there's no way of telling, whether Thoresby ever had a Ogilvy Britannia. I think it's unlikely, but he never mentioned it. It doesn't come in his manuscript lists, so I assume he didn't. But then comes Britannia Improved, of course, and this is the later one. This actually is 1731, so it's a little bit after Ralph Thoresby's death, but it demonstrates, because it's a later edition, it demonstrates what was being done with Ogilvy's Britannia, and this is Bowen's book. It's small as well. It's a quarto size book, so you could in fact take it around with you. Very much the same, as you can see. It's got the compass points, it's got the roads, and they're in the same way marked, hedged or not hedged. It's got the hills, the rivers, the bridges, much more information about towns and the country round about. But of course, constantly mentioning the places that border on the roads. You just take the main road, and then everywhere else goes off, and you're told where it's going to. Very useful if you're just going along that single track. That, incidentally, is a compass from the First World War, but I thought it was interesting to add it to the side of the other compass points. When Ralph Thoresby went to London in 1701, which is recorded in that manuscript in the grammar school, this was the route he took. It's interesting, I think, for a variety of reasons. One is that sometimes he intrudes his own antiquarian interests into it. Sometimes he puts a lot of his interest in the nobility into it. And at other times, it mentions places which no longer exist, which is also can be interesting. What I like, of course, is driving down the A1 and picking off all Thoresby's places. In fact, my wife gets fed up with hearing, that's a Thoresby place. But they're there, you know, if you're interested, you can still pick them, usually off the main track, but they're still around. The first thing that you notice there is Hundersflet. Thoresby, of course, is passionately interested in places and place names and the origins of them. He's not right. It isn't Hunslet doesn't come from Hundersflet, but never mind. He is interested enough to try and find it out. The same with Low Hill a little bit later on. You'll see Low Hill, and he's put in brackets LOE Hill, because what he thinks is that Low Hill, which seems to be a nonsense, is actually low as in arbor low. It means a raised bit, so it's hill, really, he is suggesting. And that's why he puts that LOE in this particular way. And then you'll see Heath Hall, because of course you can see Heath Hall, Sandaltown, the ruins of the castle, his antiquarian interests, Crofton, Falby, Nostell, Ragby, Ackworth Park, interest in the nobility, Emsall, Wampole Stubbs, and Wampole. Wampole Stubbs is a bit just before you get into Wampole. And then the Roman rig. One of his passions, of course, is Roman remains in this area. And so Roman rig is when you see the ridge of the Roman road, which he's approaching, because there is no direct coach from Leeds to London, so he has to go to Ferrybridge in order to pick up the York to London coach. And when he says Roman rig, he means he can see where the Roman road is approaching Ferrybridge, which is where they changed coach. So that first bit down to Ferrybridge is the local coach, and then from Ferrybridge onwards, it's the York to London one. And you'll notice we're still in June the 9th, and we've only got the Ferrybridge. So this is a long trip. Several bridges, Doncaster, Bawtry, Scrooby, and then but that pie into Notts. Then Sherwood Forest, Duke of Newcastle's seat at Hatton, the noted eel pie house. I think that's lovely. Obviously, it's where you stopped for a quick eel pie. And curiously enough, there is a picture of it in the Historic England collection, or there was, because when I was looking for this originally, I found this picture of the eel pie house, and I thought, oh, good, I'll add it to these pictures so you can see what it looked like. It's not there anymore, it's disappeared. So I don't know what Historic England have done with the picture, but anyway, there is a picture of the eel pie house. Lincoln Minster you can see in the distance. Obviously, it's not close to Carlton, Cromwell, Muscombe Bridge, then Lord Lessington's seat. Long Billington, which is actually Long Bennington, and it's still there. In fact, if you're going just down towards Grantham, it goes off to Long Bennington, and it is long. We took the trip because one of my aunts had a friend, a school friend, and she went and visited her in Long Bennington, and I was fascinated to see what Bennington looked like, and it just is a long straight strip. Then over to Grantham, now dined. Obviously, if you're now into your second day, dined on the first day, obviously, dined on the second day, and he usually marks when they dined. So you spot that as you go through. The Roman way, that's the exciting bit again, the Roman way. Oops. Stamford. We'll come in a minute to the two noble houses of the Earl of Exeter. The Earl of Exeter's one house that everybody knows is Burghley House. So this is just after you come out of Stamford, you go up that hill, and there on the top is Burghley House. On the other hand, on the other side, there is another house belonging, or there was another house belonging to the Earl of Exeter, which I've got some pictures of because I thought it was quite interesting. Peterborough Minster you can see from a distance. Bugden, later Buckton, the Bishop of England of Lincoln's Palace. He managed to look round the Bishop of Lincoln's Palace, but the coachman refused to wait while he went and had a look round the church. So he makes a note of this in his diary. Could not look round the church because the coachman would not delay the coach. Most unreasonable. Then down on through. So all these are familiar places, of course. The noted bad lanes, because there were places where either the road was particularly bad or else the hedges were coming in a bit close, and you had to be aware that they weren't ambushed by highwaymen. Hospital erected by Mr. Rain, a citizen of London. That's one of the things that Lum and Hargrave got wrong, by the way. That's what it really says. So if you ever decide to read this exciting bit of the diary, you'll see that is well, you won't see that, but you'll see as a reference to it, and it's wrong. The 5 or 6 little hills are still there. I had a look on the Ordnance Survey map because I was intrigued by these 5 or 6 little hills, and artificial barrows or sepal. Yes, I think that's still roughly the idea of what they are. And then we get to Hatfield dined. Now, one of the things which appears in the diary entry is a copy of the inscriptions on some of the church tombs in Hatfield. So that there's an additional bit there. And the Earl of Salisbury's tomb in the church, Ralph Thoresby does quite an elaborate description of, which is also part, as it were, of the diary. Then into Middlesex and London. Now, this is the place that I was saying I was intrigued by. This is Wothorpe Hall, and that's a contemporary 18th century plan of Wothorpe Hall, and it's in the middle of that blob. And this is one of the Earl of Exeter's houses. What happened to it? I'll show you what it looked like. There's what it looked like. What happened to it was, because it was owned jointly with Burley, and because this was obviously very close, it's only a mile or so across fields, it became a quarry for building additions to Burley. So this was actually not totally demolished, but considerably altered in order to fill in some of the gaps that they felt existed in Burley House. And that's what it become. And is still there. So it still exists. But you can see, if you look at the two, I can get, you see there are parts that become those towers when it's been partially demolished. But that's Wothorpe Hall, and it's still run as a commercial venture. I've never been there, but I don't think it's running there. I mean, I think that'd be a bit awkward. But that I thought it was worth putting in to show that the kind of thing that Ralph Thoresby's interested in, and B, its later fate. Whoops, wrong way. Now, can I get right back to the beginning? Let me just, sorry about this. Now, this rather hazy picture, I would have liked to have used, but the reproduction was not very good. It's a view of Otley from the Chevin, and when I come around that bend, just above Otley, and suddenly that view opens up, and it is absolutely wonderful. And that, which is a Rhodes picture, and obviously from the early 19th century, is the kind of image that I get. It's this wonderful opening up of the view as you come around, with the higher hills in the distance. Why it's of interest from our present point of view, is because this is the first view that Ralph Thoresby describes when he writes his diary entry that is the second one. Sorry, this is terribly complicated. The second entry which Lum and Hargrave didn't reproduce. If you look at that, you will get this description of coming out to over the Chevin and seeing this view. But whereas we, I think, would generally look at that view and think that is absolutely beautiful, he doesn't. He says, from here you can see the houses of this person, this person, this person, a row of houses in that district, then the row of houses in the other direction. He is, it seems, only interested in this view as it represents the houses of the people who are living there. Some of those houses, of course, still there, but it's a completely different kind of viewpoint, it seems to me. And because in this case there is the fair copy version as well, when he comes to do the fair copy, he just adds information to the people who own the houses. So you get more and more information about the owners and nothing about the rest. And though he does say it is a wonderful view, it's really the extent of the wealth, I think, of it that he's interested in, rather than the beauty of it. Well, I think that's probably the right place to stop. We come round full circle, and there we are.
Thank you very much, Peter, for sharing your knowledge and presenting that so thoughtfully, and it's just so interesting. And I think you've brought alive the spirit of Ralph Thoresby again this lunchtime for us. Are there any questions in the room? Observations? Yeah. Yeah.
You talked about the letters.
Yeah.
He was taken to London.
Sorry,
I'll repeat the question, Peter.
Yeah.
Because that'll help the people
Yes.
on Zoom as well. So yeah.
Letters that were being taken to London.
Yes.
But they seem to be transcriptions of references. How did that work?
So the letters that were taken to London were transcriptions of references.
Yeah.
And how did that work?
Well, I think it can't be absolutely sure, but I think the letters were sent by post in advance, but he wanted to know what had been said so that when he faced the creditors, he would know exactly what had been written. The alternative is that he took a copy of the letters with him, but he also needed a copy after he'd handed over. But yeah, the same question came into my mind. You know, how was it done?
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Well, a couple of questions. Firstly, do you know how the grammar school at Leeds has these letters? And would it have been the remnants of the diary? And would it have been the grammar school that had bound them like that together? And then supplementarily, would AI read and translate these tiny bits of writing and make it easy?
Could be. Yes, I don't know. I don't know the actual course of events that led to the grammar school having the manuscript. But it is a manuscript of Thomas Wilson. I mean, that's how you describe it. And I think you don't know, Chris. Either it was given or it was bought.
Well, he was a school teacher, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Thomas
yes, he
Wilson.
was.
So
yeah.
Did he teach? He didn't teach at the grammar school.
No.
Did he?
No.
But it may have had something to do with the fact that he was a teacher and it's been passed.
Yeah. I don't know how long it's been there. We'd have to ask the archivists, who are incidentally enormously helpful. It was a pleasure working on this manuscript, even though the eye strain was terrible.
Yeah. Interesting point about AI as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Whether they could.
Yes, I don't know. Yes, read this.
Yeah. How interesting, yes. Yeah.
I wondered if anyone had cross-referenced the sermons that he recorded, because he said 6, I think, sermons that he put in the diary. And whether you could cross-reference that with some church record or some other record of whether the sermons, where they've taken place.
It's something that has occurred to me, and I did wonder whether, because there are some relatively well-known people that he's listening to in London, and it occurred to me that they might have been published afterwards, and that it would be interesting to see what his version is like. But it's something I haven't gone into, but you're quite right. They could be available elsewhere. Yeah.
Yes, Roy, you had a question, I think.
With regard to the tiny handwriting, do you think that Thoresby might have been short-sighted? Because short-sighted people tend to do tiny little writing without glasses. You can read it.
Yes, I don't think so, because his normal hand, when he's writing not under stress, is quite large, or large-ish, But this is in order to cram as much as you possibly can onto a small piece of paper, I think. What struck me, incidentally, in terms of the, I mean, in relation to the small handwriting, is I didn't mention that you have to chop the end of the quill in order to give yourself a sharp edge. But in order to write that small, you'd need a tiny point on the so you'd have this tiny point, then you'd chop it, and then shortly afterwards you'd find you had to do it all over again because it gives way. So yes.
Yeah. Okay, another question at the back.
So say you was travelling and you went to a certain place, would you collect an object as found when you travelled as a sort of?
I didn't.
That was a question about collecting and whether he collected anything on his travels.
When he visited, yes. When he went to the Townleys in this second entry that's in the grammar school manuscript, he talks to somebody there, obviously, and they say, "Oh, we've got such and such," and he says, "Oh," so he didn't actually take it away with him, but he copied it out. So there's a complete family tree of one branch of a family that he's interested in, which he copies out, and that's in the manuscript as well. So yes, he was certainly on the lookout all the time. Yes.
Yeah, Rachel.
Some of us in this room were fortunate to hear in September Alan Herrera giving a talk about the Ogilvy strip maps, and he sent us a proper recording of his slideshow with him doing the voiceover, which we're going to put up on, I hoped it would have been done by now already, on the Phil and Lit website. And it's very fascinating to learn more about how that came to be. And you're quite right that it's highly unlikely that Thoresby, because we know he wasn't massively rich, was he?
No.
Would have had a copy. So that's one thing, and it is a really fascinating story how that came to be. And there is a copy of Alan Herrera's book in the library. And the other thing is about the Rhodes picture, looking at Otley, would have been done with the new turnpike. So Thoresby wouldn't have seen that because that was done in the middle of the 18th century, as people will know.
Yeah.
But it would have been a very different route, wouldn't it? Down Pool Bank and along the bottom. You wouldn't have had that view at the time.
No.
Yeah.
No. Right. No.
Okay. Right. Any no more questions. I wondered about highwaymen, Peter, and how lawless it was travelling.
Yeah.
Because he did a lot of travelling, didn't he? And given that it took 4 days to get to London, he must have gone down to London and back a few times every year.
He did.
But it seems to have been relatively safe. I don't think there's any reports of having problems.
One of the places that he notes is Robbery Wood. And he says it's called Robbery Wood because of the dangers that there are. He himself is never attacked or robbed, but plenty of people were. So you know, I mean, he was well aware of it, should we say?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you again, Peter. That was really
not at all.